Okay, good evening. Welcome to the Monday, January 5th, 2026 Cabarrus County Board of Education work session. I'm Rob Walter, the board chair, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'm going to start with our introductions, and we'll again start on my left-hand side here with our Teacher of the Year, Madison Middle. Welcome. We have board member Shannon Lancaster, board member Catherine Moore, board member Sam Treadaway, our superintendent, Dr. Kapicki, and on my right, I have board vice chair Greg Mills, board member Pam Escobar, and our board attorney, William Eisenhower. Melanie Freeman is under the weather this evening, so she is not able to join us here. So with that, we will move on to our opening ceremony, which is the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. So if you'd stand with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So board members, we've had our agenda out there on the board docs for a few days now. Need to adopt our agenda. If there are any changes, let me know. Otherwise, I need a motion in a second.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we accept the agenda and approve it as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Treadaway.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Anybody opposed? All right, agenda is set for the evening, and we'll move right on to section 4, board chair and superintendent comments. I will keep mine pretty short tonight. Just wanted to thank our staff and the board members for the time and attention given to the materials that are before us tonight. This is a work session, as a reminder. So the goal tonight is thoughtful discussion and clarity. No final decisions or votes tonight. I also want to personally show my appreciation to our terrific staff. Many of those people are in this room. It takes a lot of effort, time, and preparation from a lot of different people so that we have the materials we need for a thorough discussion of these essential items on our agenda. I also want to say thank you to the fellow board members. Your preparation and your engagement is appreciated as we continue this important work on behalf of students, families, and communities. We recognize that our decisions affect real families, students, and staff, and we don't take that responsibility lightly. So we appreciate the trust that's been placed with us. So with that, I will move on to 4.02, our superintendent comments.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. I as well keep my comments brief. Just a few reminders for our students and community. First, we'd like to welcome back all of our students, our staff, and our families as we begin a new chapter after the winter break. I hope that the time away brought moments of rest, joy, and connection with friends and family and people that you care about and love. As we return to our classrooms and schools, we do so refreshed, recharged, and ready to build on the great work already underway this year. We're excited to see our students back, reconnect with their colleagues, and continue growing together as a school community. So here's to a strong start and a great semester ahead. As a reminder to everyone, January is Board of Education Appreciation Month. January is the month where we want to take a moment to thank our Cabarrus County Board of Education members for their service, leadership, and unwavering commitment to our students, staff, and families. Their work often happens behind the scenes, but their impact is felt in every classroom, on every campus, and across every part of our community. We are grateful for the time, thoughtfulness, and care they bring to the important decisions that shape the future of Cabarrus County schools. Thank you for being the champions for our children and for your support and all that you do for our schools and the children that are in them. A reminder to all of our folks out there in our community that the kindergarten registration opens February 1st. And we're excited to welcome the class of 2029 to Cabarrus County schools in the fall. We encourage families to help us spread the word by sharing this information with friends, neighbors, and anyone who may have a rising kindergarten. Getting registered early helps ensure a smooth start to a child's educational journey, and we can't wait to welcome our newest learners and their families into our school community. Information on in-person registration events for new kindergarten enrollees will soon be available at our www.cabarrus.k12.nc.us/kindergarten website. And I'm sure that I said that wrong. It's the 2039 class that we're welcoming. And as we talk about kindergarten registration in our future, it's never too early to start talking about graduation. This is the final stretch, and how our students finish matters. Every assignment completed and every goal met brings you one step closer to that graduation goal line. To all of our students, we encourage you to finish strong. Remember, you've earned it, and we're proud of you. Our staff is currently making preparations for our 2026 graduation ceremonies, which again will be held at the Cabarrus Arena and Event Center in May. A complete 2026 graduation schedule may be found by visiting our district website. So again, Happy New Year to everyone and welcome back to a hopefully exciting, eventful 2026 school year. Mr. Walter?
Thank you, Dr. Vicky. So we'll move on to our report section. The board had asked staff for an update on the capacity situation in the Northwest area. So we have Dr. Jonathan Bowers is going to come up and talk to us about the Northwest Elementary Schools enrollment numbers. And you've got a presentation for us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Dr. Hickey, and I'd like to say a Happy New Year to each of you. Certainly here tonight just to be able to share an informational update. Obviously, the presentation itself does not come with any recommendations. It doesn't come with any action items, but it is an opportunity to be able to inform the board as some of the enrollment trends that we're seeing play out at our elementary schools, primarily within the northwestern portion of the county as a whole. So you'll see here for us tonight, just for the agenda, I want to review some of the historical context associated with the schools and the identified schools that we've included within the presentation. I want to then touch base on the current enrollment and then what might be some projected enrollment and projected growth we might anticipate or we might encounter moving forward for the next 4 to 5 years. And then obviously outline just what might be recommendations or what might be considerable options as we look ahead and certainly cast our eyes to the horizon and what's ahead. So a bit of a review. This information and this data has been pulled from the State Demographer's Office. What it does is it provides a glimpse as to what is anticipated to be school-aged population students in Cabarrus County for the next 15 years. So the collection was actually took place in 2020, and these are all projection numbers. But some of the things we can say we see playing out are the 2025 projections that were put in place at the time are coming to fruition. So the top line that you see there would be the total student numbers for Cabarrus County schools from birth to 17 years of age. So that does include what would be considered pre-K students. And that number is important because we like to know what that 0 to 4 age population looks like, because they one day will certainly be students with Cabarrus County schools and future kindergartners. The line that you see below that top line, that trend line, that shows you what is the actual K-12 student enrollment projections. And if you follow that data point down to what would be the 25 school year, there are roughly 45,379 students based on this projection in Cabarrus County, not in Cabarrus County schools, in the county. Our market share typically is about 78%, give or take, of what would be total student availability across the county. The remaining 22% will be distributed among Kannapolis City schools, charter schools, private schools, and home schools. So we've seen that trend more or less stay a constant and a norm for the last 5 years or so. So as we look ahead, we can start to get a sense on what these numbers might represent for us and what this might look like, not just for this Northwest region, but the district as a whole. And it's important that we look at the entire context as we begin to look at conversations and as we look to say, okay, what might be some considerations for the future. What I'm sharing with you here are density maps, kind of a then versus now look at the Northwest Elementary School sector. You can see the graphic on the left represents what was the student density concentration in the 2019-2020 school year. And for selected schools that we have, and I'll work kind of from a northern, kind of moving counterclockwise standpoint. In the upper right, we have Charles Boger Elementary School. Coming back, you can see we have Odell Elementary and Odell Primary. Below that, we have Cox Mill Elementary. Moving back across, Carl A. Furr Elementary, and then we have Weddington Hills also included in this graphic as well. So that kind of casts a wide net and representation as to where we're seeing these pockets. Some of the pockets you see deeper reds and yellows in the 25-26 school year than you did 5 years ago. In some areas we're starting to see phase out and we're starting to see age out a little bit because students have already matriculated through elementary school But as you know, if you visited any of these schools, we're finding them in middle schools and high schools as well now from an enrollment standpoint. So it just gives us a sense on what are we seeing and what's playing out from a residential development standpoint and from a student population standpoint. Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, Pam.
Sorry, I just asked a clarifying question.
Of course.
Clarifying question. Red is a larger impact. Yellow is not quite.
I'm sorry, I should have said that. Thank you, great question. So the red, the deeper, the yellows themselves are going to be the greatest concentration. Yeah, the closer to the sun color, if you will. I'm sorry, maybe I should have said that at the outset. I apologize. The yellows will be that which obviously we see the most densely populated areas. And then as it becomes a cooler color and becomes less pronounced, that then would obviously indicate more of a student distribution that's a little bit widespread. Okay, thank you for that. So this graphic here just gives you a sense of what would be the utilization. And again, as a reminder, our utilization numbers that we use for these presentations and for informational purposes are based off what is the design capacity of the school. We do have modulars as use, but one of the things we always want to certainly be cautious against is using a modular as a permanent structure. They were meant to be temporary in nature and certainly provide some relief, but one would certainly not necessarily want to factor them in as a long-term student learning environment situation when possible. So these just give you what is going to be the design capacity utilization. And utilization is just what percent of the students in that school, how does that relate to then the percent, or excuse me, the number in which that school was designed to be serving. So if we got an elementary school that is built for 900 students, and obviously you have 950 students in there, that school is overutilized as it exists from a design standpoint. So in 2019-2020, you could see that we had 2 schools to which were in that red color, and we start to use red when we get above 120% utilization. And so only 2 schools at the time in this region that we're looking at were over that threshold. When we look at today's numbers, we now see 4, and you see the Odells have now been added to both Cox Mill and to Weddington Hills from an overutilization standpoint, and that's really a function of what the schools were designed or built to serve. You can also see one of the biggest changes between Charles E. Boger Elementary back in 1920 versus where Charles E. Boger is now. So again, they're continuing to trend in this direction, and we anticipate that in the next year or 2 will be over 120% utilized as well. So it's also important to understand both student enrollment trends, but also enrollment and utilization as well. So when we look at this holistically and we start to anticipate what might be some shifts or what might be some trends that continue, we use 2 numbers to really give us information from a planning standpoint. One would be the base population. And base population is simply nothing more than the students that actually live within the defined boundary. That's our base. Not all students, however, that live within the boundary attend school within that boundary. We have wonderful options here in Cabarrus County Schools and a multitude of reasons why students may seek educational purposes at other sites as well, be that through program choice, be that through student transfers, or be that through some of our specialized setting services that we offer from an EC standpoint as well. So when these things happen, that next number that you see is our enrollment projection, and that factors in the transfer ins, transfer outs for students. So if we were to look at the top table only, and that takes into account just the base enrollment, what is the maximum number of students that could potentially attend that school based on those who live within the boundary, you can see the changes over time from Cox Mill, Charles E. Boger, Odell Elementary, and Odell Primary. And in all cases, we've seen double-digit percentage increases in a 5-year span. And I think one of the things I would certainly bring your attention to with Odell Elementary and Odell Primary, while we have 2 schools in that area, just within the boundary itself, we're looking at over 2,100 students that are of elementary age population. So a significant number of students within that particular boundary from which we're pulling for the 2 schools that we have to service those students. table at the bottom lets us look at this now through the lens of what is the enrollment projection? Taking in all the transfer in, transfer out historicals that we have, how does that then play out in terms of the utilization from a design standpoint? And then this is where we start to use the mobiles, because this is where we know once we've exhausted that mobile utilization, we really are looking to say, we may have to have some conversations about what next. So for where we stand now in 25-26, referring to the bottom table, if we looked at our mobile utilization, you could see right now for Odell Primary School, we're at 122% when we factor the mobiles in for serving their student enrollments. We anticipate for Odell Elementary next year, seeing that number creep closer to that 120% threshold, simply because we have a large incoming class for Odell Elementary next year, a good number of second graders rolling up. They'll be gaining more second graders than they are exiting fifth graders. And when we see that happen, that obviously tells us there's a bubble coming through as well. But you can see for yourself, just again, from a where do we stand, what is currently playing out, what are the numbers we're working with, it just gives us some comparisons to say the same trends we've, again, alluded to before and we've actually referenced, we continue to see playing out. The next tables we have are what are going to be those planning projections. This is now forecasting ahead as to if nothing were to be done, what might happen. Again, these are, a lot of factors can influence it. We know that, but again, it's based off the best information we have using our models and then being able to take into account all the historical information that's been made available. So looking at the top total only, top table, I should say, that's our boundary, our base population. And for Boger, Cox Mill, Odell Elementary, and Odell Primary, you can see we anticipate remaining right now from a design standpoint, design capacity, well over 120% utilized for the next 5 years down the road. Now, for some, we start to see some stabilization. For Cox Mill Elementary, for example, if we were to look at our projections from a projected boundary standpoint, we see that right now for Cox Mill Elementary School, those numbers don't fluctuate wildly from a percentage standpoint. All right, so some nominal movement within, and if you think back to the previous graphic I shared with the modular units and where they stood, we're sitting at just over around 100% utilization with the modulars in play for Cox Mill. For the Odells, however, what we start to see happening here is they are now continuing to rise and continue to increase their utilization year over year to the point that we would see about 160% utilization, in fact, in some of those schools, should those same trends continue. So it just gives us a way to look at this through the lens of the boundary and what's anticipating to happen. And then while we can look at this through the enrollment trends, which again, transfer in, transfer out, we see those same numbers hold true. So it lets us know, at least from a forecast standpoint, we're seeing the same thing play out from both a boundary standpoint and an enrollment standpoint, which when those two things align, that the indicator is more than likely to say, unless there are changes, you're going to continue to move in that direction along the way. So again, these are things that are commonly known, and certainly I just illustrate them just because it is a good reminder to say what are the implications and how does this then look at the school level. So when we talk about overcrowding and really, students in schools to which they weren't necessarily designed or built to accommodate, there are temporary measures that have to be considered. But as you can see, I think one of the things we also think of is there are some larger class size implications, especially amongst our elementary schools in grades 4 and 5. We start to look at what might be the impact on some of the things that are non-core instructional aspects of the educational learning experience. Access to art, access to PE. We think about access to certain other intervention strategies that might be there. And that's not because the kids don't have them. That's just because of the number, the time at which they're able to engage in said activities might be sometimes lessened at the school level as well. The core capacity, what does this look like for lunches to be served, when they have to begin, when they have to end, the gymatoriums or gymnasium spaces, hallways, restroom facilities. So again, there are a lot of implications in what it looks like from a resource-driven standpoint at the school level and how that then plays out. And obviously we've all experienced congestion right? It's just one of the things that does occur. And we know that sometimes that then also can be a side effect or another byproduct of it as well. So to mitigate it from time to time, what school systems have considered and what they have reviewed, and again, this is not an absolutism, this is just merely informational, is that they have looked at some mechanisms to offer temporary relief, which might be done through a capping option or being able to put in place a way to slow the growth until relief can be had. Now, one of the things I will share is that we currently are in the process of not only securing land, obtaining land, and beginning what would be groundbreaking for a new elementary school in the northwestern portion of the county. And so we fully anticipate that elementary school as we stand here today, again, all things considered, and if things continue to progress as we hope that they will, opening its doors in the fall of 2028. So we know that that's going to provide some relief. So we see again, what is that forecast, what is that opportunity ahead, and what is that potential that lies to be able to give us a chance to be able to have some measures in place. But again, 2028 does put us another 2.5 school years away from that being the reality of it. So when school districts look at the potential for what might be a capping consideration, these are some of the things that capping can deliver and what it could offer should one consider those. And again, it does provide temporary relief until new construction actually takes place. It does have an opportunity to be able to stabilize some of the class sizes. Obviously, it slows down some of those pinch points when it basically becomes a growth piece that the school is grappling with or certainly dealing with. Does reduce some of the strains both on the building and the staff and the resources. And then when we look at this, it obviously does lighten some of the load on some of the core spaces that are associated with the school itself. So again, thinking through this as to if we again follow the trend, and if we again are to say that there is a relief measure that would certainly be on the horizon in the fall of 2028, then what might be considerations between now and then? Again, no recommendation, nothing of action to be considered, but just things to start stimulating thought. One consideration for this would be stay the current model. Current model is continue to enroll as we had, continue to find ways to be able to certainly serve students that are in each of these schools that are impacted by this, and then look at that to say that service will continue. And the advantage of that would be is that no students would be impacted from an enrollment or a movement standpoint, and that there will be no fiscal allocation given for a facility or operational piece, right? That's the see what happens approach. The disadvantage is, as you can see there, does not allow for additional classroom spaces. Schools would certainly be able to have to endure some of the things in which they may be challenged with or tasked with now. And then ultimately, there does become a tipping point, again, to where you could be looking at some, supervisory concerns, occupancy concerns, availability concerns, and then ultimately, obviously, student safety. Another consideration, we have used modular units in the past to be able to offer relief, and certainly that is something that we can see around the county as a measure that has actually helped some of the schools, some of which we mentioned previously tonight. So with a modular consideration, obviously the benefits or advantages you would outline there is, once again, it does not involve the movement of any students, does not create any enrollment changes in that sense, does provide relief within the classroom spaces themselves. One of the trade-offs, however, is that it doesn't necessarily give you that core capacity relief. It doesn't make your cafeteria larger. It doesn't make gymnasiums larger. It doesn't make hallways larger. There's a significant financial cost that is associated with the modular units that would be needed. This is just a ballpark guesstimate of about $2 million. Again, that would obviously give us a chance to be able to have additional capacity each schools, if that were a consideration. But then the timeline for getting those installed and having those operational certainly becomes another element as well. And then the other disadvantage and drawback for your modulars is what happens when they're no longer needed. That's certainly something there that we would have to always just keep in mind as we install those. Another consideration, and I'd reference this, is to look at again, a hard cap. And school districts have utilized that as again, a buffer to get to a place where you can slow some of the growth. And a hard cap, in essence, when that term is used, just simply means a cap on the enrollment of schools in an affected area within that boundary and that boundary only. So a school's boundary would then be capped so that there is no future new student enrollment. You simply would allow a kindergarten class to come in, and then you would see grade matriculation up from first to second, second to third, third to fourth, et cetera, naturally within the boundary itself. And then families, for whatever period of time, would attend an overflow school or a relief school. So with the hard cap, it certainly gives you an opportunity to say, slowing the growth to the greatest degree possible, lessening some of the class size challenges that might be occurring, and then you apply that cap uniformly throughout the boundary as well, such that all newcomers or those that would be enrollees in the future would certainly have it applied equally. Now, the drawbacks is that there is a financial cost associated with the cap. And again, it's difficult to say and certainly project how much that would be, but our best guesstimates right now, based on some of the enrollment trends and some of the new enrollment factors, and then looking at that as to what it might parlay to in terms of miles per student transported. It costs us about $5.13 to transport a student 1 mile on a bus for Cabarrus County Schools. So when we extrapolate that over the miles we would be transporting, our current estimates would be around $225,000 annually for each year you put it in place. Could go up, could go down. I don't many things going down these days, but obviously that would be contingent upon the cost of fuel, and then the cost of parts, labor, et cetera. So that does have a tendency to fluctuate, but that is, as we hear, stand projection today. The other disadvantage with this cap, you could potentially have students attending multiple schools within a 2-year or 3-year window. And then again, inevitably, one of the things that we'll do is that children would have longer bus rides, because you would certainly be transporting students to a school that would be farther from what their domicile would be at that point. And then it would take additional resources from a transportation piece. And another consideration is a limited cap. Some school districts have used this in the past. If I'm not mistaken, I think once upon a time Cabarrus County Schools may have. Back in the early 2000s, please don't quote me on that date, but as best I can understand. And a limited is just neighborhoods that are experiencing the greatest growth and where the highest density is. So those are the greatest student yield, if you will. So identifying those which would slow, not completely eliminate any of the growth, but it does lessen the impact across the entire boundary. But obviously you can see disadvantages there. There still is a cost. The cost of that consideration would be less than a whole boundary cap consideration. It still adds strain to the boundary itself, transporting students. Still would have longer bus ride times for those students in those neighborhoods that would be impacted. And then obviously the case of being able to attend multiple schools, elementary schools, in a short timeline certainly exists as well. So I know I've covered a lot. Again, this is just really just an opportunity to be able to give you the information in advance for just considerations and potential planning purposes. And then ultimately, as we certainly progress through the months ahead and as the new year starts to get behind us a little bit, then were we to do anything or take any considerations, what might those be? So I'm going to pause for questions that I know you got.
Okay, board members, questions? Pam?
I'm just going to make a couple comments first, and then I have a question. But I'll just say, as a Cox Mill Elementary parent, and talking about capacity in the school, we do have modular units, so it's interesting to see the numbers. But when your kids go to a school that is over capacity, luckily we've figured out a way to still put them in modular units and have teachers there, so the classes aren't huge. But yes, lunch is very short, to the point where like my kids chose their time when they were in elementary school to bring their lunch because they couldn't eat fast enough to get through the line to sit at the table. So if you do nothing, those times become even shorter. I mean, to the point where like right now they're at like 20 minutes or something. I mean, it is a very short window to eat. And little kids, I don't know if you've dealt with little kids, getting them to eat can take forever. So I can't even imagine. So elementary, it's important how long they have their lunchtime. And then I think about the tornado warning that my kids experienced while they were there. So what does that mean? When the kids have a tornado warning and you're in a modular unit, or cottage learning cottages that they call them at Coxman Elementary, you got to run inside the building, and you are huddled in the hallway, and you are, and again, thankfully they're little people, but you are squished in a hallway going like this, and you're not in a classroom, you're in a hallway, and you're trying to get away from windows and all this kind of stuff. And so, again, when you're in a building that wasn't built to really handle that many people, an already scary situation feels even scarier. So I say all that. I really hope that as we're having this discussion, that we're leaning away from option one. I understand money is an issue, and we have to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, but I really don't want to do nothing, because I just think the implications will affect the quality of education that we can provide, and 2 years is a long time, in my opinion, in elementary. Especially when you're talking about reading, and that's where they learn to learn, right? And so it's just very important to me that we do something. And then my last question is for the last two options, overflow school. What does that mean? Because right now we use an overflow school for Culture and Web because we had an empty school.
Yes,
what are you thinking for that? And again, I know that that's a decision that we would have to make, but where do we have room? And when you talk about transportation, thank you for the $5.13 mileage. That was helpful for me. How long could they be? Like right now, our district average, again, because of Culture and Web, we've learned so much, right? But how big of a difference could this possibly be for 2 years? And again, I understand it's a sacrifice and it's difficult, but the reality is we don't have enough schools right now. We just don't. And so we have to figure out something.
So the easier of those to answer would be the overflow question. And again, we would certainly use what data we have available at the time that we get closer to what considerations may be before us. And then the overflow in this sense means school that has available capacity. So not a swing school. Great point you bring up. I think just for clarity's sakes, it was an existing school in closest proximity. I'll use that, closest as possible, that we know that could absorb it for whatever limited period of time that may be. So that's the definition of an overflow. To be able to answer questions about length of rides and things like that, I don't want to speculate. I really don't. That it would be premature on our part right now to even say anything, because I don't want to mislead anybody in any capacity. But once we have a better idea of what might be a direction, then that's something that would certainly be part of the planning process and the informational process that would accompany that direction. Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Greg.
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation.
Yes, sir.
Just a couple of quick questions. I agree with Pam. I don't think doing nothing is an option here. Particularly when you look at Odell Primary, you can't increase class sizes there. You can't because of the nature of the students that are there. They're capped by the state, by statute. My other question is, if you're going to do the targeted capping, that option 4, and you're looking at high density neighborhoods, is that what you said, that are affecting those schools?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so are those high density neighborhoods going to be lower income neighborhoods? Is that going to affect lower income populations in more harshly than it would other populations? Is it more likely that those students are going to be the ones that are going to have to be transported to other overflow schools?
So again, I don't want to predict or guesstimate. I think the presentation is just to say, if that were a direction which warranted additional research, then as we engaged in that activity, we would look at those demographic factors and what might be implications, such that movement of one or another does not disproportionately impact another school. So much as we looked at if you think back to the criteria that the board had established, and we certainly feel are very sound in any of our redistricting efforts, that demographic figure is important. So it's
Dr.
important
Dr.
to know what
Pickett
that
wants
is.
to weigh in that too.
No, I think Dr. Bowers answered it appropriately. What I would add to that is to just remind the board, these are options we need you to start considering, because we're going to be coming back to you with the solid recommendation in the next month or two. So we want to begin that conversation tonight. And Mr. Mills, to your point, that'll be a question we can definitely research and look into if that was an option to be explored. Part of the presentation this evening was to encourage and see what the questions were the board were going to ask, so we can know what to go back and kind of take a look at things we may have missed that the board will see. That's why we're sharing this with you tonight, to get your input. So thank you for that. Good insight.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
To my left. Catherine?
I was at Odell the last time we capped it. One of the issues we had was people are buying their homes in this district for this school. So, you know, we had parents that came and was upset. So all I ask is that the communication really gets out, either through realtors or online somehow, to let them know that when you buy this house, you move into this house, you may be going to another school besides Odell, because it did put us in a bad situation. And, you know, you're right about the capacity of the school. We even got to the point where we had to schedule bathrooms, you know, in the hallways. And, you know, no one likes being capped, but, again, it's what we have to do sometimes. Now, I can't remember what we did, because, you know, you have students moving in and out. So if we have students leaving, does that open up space to bring students back in?
So again, I don't want to forecast anything definitive. I would say that each question that you have tonight would be certainly part of what we would be able to capture and then perhaps present once there's a little bit more understanding as to what might be an opportunity moving forward. So that would certainly be factored into that.
Yeah, Dr. Pickett?
Again, appropriately answered. I think, Ms. Moore, one of the things we would look at there would be deadlines and timelines. But I think we'd have to establish clear deadlines as to when the entries would come and be considerate of those move-ins, move-outs, what we call transfer in, transfer outs during the course of the year. But I do think that if we established a particular option, we would have to have a timeline that this is the deadline for enrollment, and make sure we're very clear in communicating that out to the public.
Shannon? All right, well, I guess I'll ask some of my questions. There was a chart there that had estimated enrollments. Can you go back to
Yes,
that?
sir.
So how many students are we estimating going into the Odell area every year?
Let's see here. Tell me if this one helps.
There's one that's
answer.
got every year, there it is.
Yes, sir. So that.
So you're thinking 50, well, what is it?
Yeah, so if we were to look, so in the top table, again, this is by the boundary itself. These would be, again, what we project the number of students that would be living within that boundary. So for the next school year, for Odell Primary, we anticipate 1,091 students for the primary school living within that boundary. For the elementary school, that number goes up significantly. We're adding 100 plus to that. But again, a part of that is the roll-up that I alluded to earlier, those large second grade class coming in. And you can see each year build out as to what that would be.
So what we're seeing is there's 100 kids that would be capped, that would have to go to different schools, what you're saying, based on this projection.
Yes, sir, and these are just right now for the most part. Again, due to factor in some of the in-migration we would expect.
Sure, but
Yes,
for a
sir.
ballpark figure, you're looking,
That's right.
when we're talking the numbers being capped every year, it's 100 kids.
That's correct.
100
Potentially.
students, 100 students if you did the whole district. If you did a targeted, that's different, right?
That is correct. It would be a different number.
Okay. Do we have, I mean, I'm also not in favor of status quo. You know, at some point you have a safety issue, like payment addressed, and the educational issue. We've had teachers come to us, or at least to me, that said, you know, they're struggling with the existing kids today. And you're saying adding another couple hundred, at some point you don't have any room. And I think we've been told in previous presentations there's not even room for mobiles at most of these schools. Is that correct, or is that?
So
I mean, I think
What I'll
Toxmo was
answer
told
with-
that they're maxed out at mobiles, or is
Yeah,
that?
we're at the point now that any additional mobiles on site will have a significant impact on outdoor recreational space, restroom space, core capacity space. That's one of the things.
So
that
it's
the
not that
mobiles-
you can't put them there, or you can or can't put them there?
Well,
I mean, in previous presentations, they said at some point you can't put any more.
that is correct.
For whatever, if it's cafeteria, for whatever reason,
And there's
there's a
dimensional
limit to what you can do, and we're
Yes,
pretty
sir.
close to that limit anyway.
Yeah, you get
So
a
that other
dimensional
option of
returns.
mobiles is not gonna help us much either.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would be clear on that. I think, and I appreciate Dr. Bowers' presentation, a little hesitancy on answering that question, but as your superintendent, I would strongly recommend, I can tell you now that we really don't want to do the mobile route. It's not a viable option. So to your point, space is an issue with the mobiles, safety is an issue with the mobiles. Mrs. Escobar pointed out the fact of some of the time constraints in terms of how we service the kids. You have to be cognizant too of these are little people, short legs, tiny kids. You're thinking fire drills, hurricane drills, tornado drills, etc. There are a lot of things you have to be very cognizant of in terms of how we do that. The mobiles have certainly served us well over the years in terms of addressing some of our growth issues. But this one here, and we've been out there, looked at this quite a bit. You would be encroaching on playground space, recreational space, and we really don't want to do that. But we wanted to be very upfront with you this evening and say, here's an option. And if you make that decision as a board and direct us that way, we understand our marching orders. But our recommendation would be to stay away from the mobile option, just because for all the things I mentioned, and many more. We can again discuss this in more detail as we move forward. But we wanted to show that as an option, that is an option put out there. But the reality of it is that, not to be contradictory, it's not something that we favor.
Right, that was kind of my point, that it doesn't seem to be a effective option, at least for 100 kids. It's several mobile units that are above capacity anyway. And then I guess we were counting on the school being opened in August 2028.
as I
So
stand here
it's a-
before you tonight, that is our hope.
Yeah, so that's, again, it's tough. And do we have an idea what these fourth and fifth grade classes size will look like in these different options?
We do not have that data now,
Okay.
no, sir.
All right, I think those are mostly my notes there. Obviously, I think there's also a cost. If we don't do anything, there is additional cost that we need to consider. And are there any other ideas besides these that you're presenting us? Anything else out of the box that we might consider before we start moving kids away from their home district?
We'd be happy to go back and certainly talk with the team and explore if there's anything we might have left untouched or just not considered. And certainly if the board has any
Like,
ideas.
I mean, in
they'd
high
like to
school, they
share.
have different things that they come up with.
Pardon me?
In high school, they have different things that they proposed in different areas for overcrowding. But I mean, if you look online, there's plenty of things that the high schools have done or have more flexibilities, I guess, in elementary schools, as far as hours and days and times and things like that.
Yes. Now, the one thing I would share, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. One of the unique facets of elementary and even middle schools to a lesser degree is that the students are there from start of the day to end of the day. Our high schools are sometimes a little bit more equipped to handle some of these challenges because we do have a number of students that are educated sometimes off the school's campus, whether that be through virtual classes, whether that
Right,
be
that's
in
kind of what I was
class.
referring
Yes, sir, I'm
to,
sorry,
that high schools
I was
have more
unclear.
flexibility than elementary.
Yes, sir, that is an accurate statement on your part.
Anything else from board members? Is this, Sam?
I just want to point out too that back in the day, our idea of a mobile unit is very different than it is now. And I don't want our parents to think that the mobile units we're talking about now, where we would basically set it up, we'd run electricity, we'd run intercom, and we had a mobile unit. We've maxed all those locations out, and statutes require bathrooms to be so close, and so we're putting semi-permanent buildings out now. I would argue it's not even fair to call them mobile units anymore because they're there for a while. And but for lots of reasons, we're putting in substantial money into safety. much more so than the mobile units of our past. So I just want to be guarded using that term with folks that are envisioning what a mobile unit looks like. I got to believe these schools are just maxing out. I mean, you go to the back of Weddington Hills, for example, and you've got a school within a school back there. So I hear folks talk about a mobile unit and they think of a single wide, and it's not that way anymore.
Okay, thank you, Sam. I guess we have a timeline here. You're going to come back to us in a couple months. Do we need to maybe discuss this further at our planning session?
Yeah, I think that would be probably a good topic for us, not to put anyone on the spot this evening, but probably to talk a little bit about this in more detail and depth at the board retreat coming up. I think would be a good idea for us to bring that to you.
I'm
and
getting
get
head
some-
shakes from the board members, so yeah.
Getting some input that way. Time is very crucial here. We were looking at a February, March deadline for a final recommendation or help from the board. Doing nothing here is not an option because we truly don't have the space to continue to accommodate some of these the population coming in. So I think that the retreat would give us a good opportunity to have more detailed, deeper discussion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bowers.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Okay, we'll move on to our next report, which is a monthly budget summary and board report from Mr. Phil Penn. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, good to be back with you again. My comments tonight will be relatively brief, I think, on the financial position of the district right now, as there really hasn't been much change, certainly since the last time we got together and really within the last 2 months. My team did its most recent financial forecast meeting on December 11th, and in those meetings we go through all the different funds, all the different PRCs, one by one, looking for both favorable and unfavorable development versus our budget. We do center most of that work on the 4 pieces of the budget that really drive most of the results across the district financially. And there are both positive and negative developments. That's standard. You don't see every number come out exactly the way you budget. That's not typically how things happen. But overall, we're continuing to be largely in line with the expectations for the budget for the year. So we remain in very good financial position, particularly compared to the last 2 years at this point. I did in the second paragraph note one very minor negative that we've seen come up. For the full year, you may recall that we budgeted interest income of about $332,000, and in the first 5 months we had earned about $85,000. When I look at the run rate, and you don't just necessarily double the $85,000. There's a little more to it than that. I think the run rate gets us to $204,000 for the year, for about $128,000 less than we had budgeted, and that has a little bit to do with short-term interest rates falling faster than we had originally had planned. We think fines and forfeitures, there may be an opportunity for some of that interest income, or if not all of it, to be offset. The one caveat I would put is after 3 strong months, we had a soft month in November in terms of what came in. So again, 1 month doesn't make a trend, but we'll continue to monitor this over the next couple of months. But $128,000 in the grand scheme of a $500 million budget, it's not that much of an impact, but it is something that we're monitoring at this point. It's the one development, if you want to call it that, that's occurred in the last month or so. A little bit of late-breaking news. I did hear from our contact at PCG, it's Public Consulting Group. You may recall that that's our Medicaid consultant. We've been harassing them for updates on when we might be receiving some of our funds, and the communication I received today that they in turn had received from the state is that we should receive quarterly payments, at least 3 of them, during the month of January. So I went back and looked, and if it happens to be the 3 oldest ones that we're owed right now, that would amount to about $695,000, which would be a good start towards getting us to the budget for the full year, which was $950,000. So in a typical year when the payments are occurring as they're planned, we will see 3 or 4 of those quarterly payments come through, and then the annual payment. So if we do see 3 or 4 quarters come through in the month of January, and then the annual payment come in around the June timeframe, that has the potential to put us substantially above the $950,000 that we budgeted so far. I don't count on it until I have the check in hand, but it was a positive development I did want to share with you. Questions?
Questions from board members? Sam?
I'm just curious what kind of short-term instruments we use for interest?
Yeah, we actually defer to the state on that. It's the short-term investment fund that the state treasurer's office runs. Yeah, so that's one of two vehicles that we have available to us. The other one's through the North Carolina Capital Management Trust that are made available to school districts in the state of North Carolina. And then I play them off against each other for who's got the best interest rates at any given time. Yep.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you, Mr. Penn. You're going to stay here for our,
stay
as
for
we
the
move
next
into
item.
our items for consent or action for next week's meeting. 6.01 is the 2025 budget amendment number 3. So you can go over that for us, please.
Sure. So budget amendment number 3 has changes that affected funds 1, 2, 3, and 8. And as you can see on the memo, I've got commentary on there that what drove those increases. So overall for the State Public School Fund, Fund 1, an increase of a little over 1.3 million. The first two pieces of that are statutory bonuses that are payable to principals for several types of academic achievement, and for teachers for third grade reading achievement. That's standard. We see that recur each year, and then the state has a formula process that they go through, and we effectively just become a conduit for paying out those bonuses as prescribed by the state. Most of the remaining increase was an allotment of $266,000 for the Integrated Academic and Behavior System IABS grant, and an allotment for $184,000 for CTE credentials, both of which are typically recurring grants that we see come through at around this time of the year. In local operating, Fund 2, an increase of $980,000. That's the release of the county's contingency funds for charter school payments. What they've typically done for the last couple of years is they've held back a small amount of money within their budget in a contingency account to see how the enrollment plays out for the charter schools at this point. And so there is, based on the ADM for month 2 at the charters, which they turn into us and that we validate through Mr. Sain's area, we then issue payments directly to the charter schools based on the enrollment that they have each month. So the county did release that to us within the past month here. Federal, net increase of about $107,000. Final funding levels across our various title grants and our IDEA grant, and there were some minor budgetary adjustments that didn't increase the overall federal budget total. And then lastly, we increased the revenue expectations for our NC pre-K slots to basically reflect that we had opened up an additional classroom. That reflects about $138,000 of additional revenue we expect to receive as a result of that this year. Overall, total increase of $2.5 million and some change there to get us to $539,272,471.
Board members, we understand what we're being asked to vote on next week on this one, or do you have questions? Pam?
Thank you. I understand this, so that's what I'm good with.
Okay.
My question is, recently, it looks like the state is suing the federal government again because of some money that's not coming to schools in North Carolina. Are we part of that group that's being affected by that?
That would potentially be benefiting from that. I don't know the answer to that. I do remember seeing that news item. I would honestly need to go back and look. I'll try to have an update by the next meeting.
Thank you.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? Are we okay with adding this to consent, or do you want it out in action? Consent? Okay, we'll add that to consent for next
Perfect.
week. Thank you.
Thank you much.
All right, item 6.02, which is policies for first read. We have Dr. Sandy Ward joining us. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. First, Happy New Year and Happy Board Appreciation Month. We do appreciate all you do for us. It's always nice seeing you guys around the building and knowing that you're out in schools learning about what's going on so you can make better decisions is very inspiring to all of us. So thank you for your service. So for this evening, we have one new policy up for first read. This policy was brought up last month, but a minor change came in after the deadline, and so we're just going to bring it back for you. This policy is going to be 3226/4205 Internet Safety. It's part of the Fall 2025 package. And in this policy, it adds language in Section C in response to a new requirement. So basically, we're now following the law. And it updated some legal references, and we accepted some cross-references there. Any questions?
Board members, questions? Greg?
I apologize for not bringing this up in committee, but as I was reading the policy changes, when it talks about materials that are harmful to minors or inappropriate, it seems to restrict those to audio and visual media. And visual media, the examples usually like images and graphics. Is text media, text-based media, is that considered visual media, or is that not considered under this policy?
Great question. Mr. Singh?
To be honest, I would need to look into that and may need to speak with Mr. Eisenhower on exactly how that term is defined. We currently actively block websites for all number of reasons. We also currently have a team that goes through, and actually, much of what this is talking about as far as blocking sites that do not protect against releasing student information, we have a lengthy and exhaustive process that we go through each year to ensure that our teachers are only being directed towards websites and that they are only using sites that do protect student information. We point teachers towards our Learn platform, which we use to vet those resources, and we go through quite a bit of reading terms and conditions before they're approved. To answer your specific question, I would probably need to dive into the way that term is defined, so I'm not 100% sure. We block a lot of websites that have inappropriate content for a number of reasons. I don't know that it's specific to the imagery or the photographs used.
Thank you. Did you want to clarify?
I'll need to look into that further as well. I'm not sure. I think if you wanted to, I would say that you could move this to the action for next week, and I could be prepared to address that in comment if you want me to.
Okay, let's do that then.
And I can similarly bring, if it would be helpful, a list of, essentially we block a lot of sites for a lot of different reasons. A lot of times it's that websites have they're categorized by content, and a lot of times we block just based on that. So it may not even necessarily be the image that appears, it's because it's blocked, it's categorized a certain way. But I'll also look into that definition, see what I can find.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so will that one be on action for next week? We're going to move on to 6.03, which is policies for the second read, and these will be effective once we vote on them next week. So you want to review those real quick for us?
Sure, absolutely. We have policy 21, 25, 73, 15, confidential information. It had a required section C added there to address new statutory language, made some clarifications, and updated legal references. 3101 was dual enrollment, also part of Fall 2025, required language regarding the new career and college ready pathways in section A, and we updated legal references there as required. 3220 technology in the education program. They moved some things around, so it was just more minor there. But we did add a new statutory requirement in section A, which was required, and we also updated legal references. 3227, 7322, web page development. We added in a section, or there was some clarification, that the school system is not responsible for personal websites or web pages created by members of the Board of Education, in addition to those of students, employees, parents, groups, or other organizations. 3210 is parental inspection of and objection to instructional materials. This came out in 2025, so lots of things there. Clarified references to parents, to include legal guardian and certain other caregivers. We talked about adding a reference to 3510, revise the process for parental review of materials and the extension of time. We added in the new state law requirement that all texts had to be logged in on Destiny, which is on the school's website. So a lot of things there. That part was recommended. We updated the legal and cross-references there. 3620, extracurricular activities and student organizations. We talked about student sharing rooms and all of that. That was required. 5070, 7350, public records. We talked about updating the description of the public record information and personnel files, which was a big deal. That was required. 7100, recruitment and selection of personnel was in the summer. We added required statutory language there about criminal background checks, trying to keep everybody safe. And we also updated legal references. And last but not least, we had insurance for student transportation, spring 2025. Added in language to require liability coverages for vehicles leased or rented by our school system.
Okay, and those have been on board docs from last month and this month. No changes from last month to this month?
Yes, sir.
And have you gotten any other feedback from staff or public or anybody?
Nope.
How is that, just to let people know, where do they find that, or how do they review our policies under consideration? Are they on the website?
Yes, yes. So if staff and community are on board docs, all of our policies are there, and it tells you where we are in the process, first read, second read. So, and then they hopefully know that I'm the policy person, or they can get in touch with Dr. Kopicki. We get lots of questions from Dr. Kopicki about policies, just not this month.
Okay, so again, the board is open to feedback from the public on these things before we vote on them. But before we, any other further discussions, questions? Are we okay with all these on consent? Yes, yes. All right, those will be added to the consent agenda. Thank you very much, Dr. Ward. Dr. Kopicki? Huh? For which one? Go ahead.
Mr. Penn, can you address the question that was brought up earlier by Mrs. Escobar?
This answer, courtesy of Google. The issue of question is full service community school grants, primarily targeted at low income and rural areas in North Carolina, has no impact on Cabarrus County schools. Okay. Yep.
Thank you for that clarification. I didn't see anything else on our open session, so we do have a need to go into closed session, and that recommended motion is there on the board docs. I'd need a motion and a second to go into closed session.
Make a motion that we go into closed session.
Second.
So a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ready to vote? All in favor of moving into closed session, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're going to say goodnight to our listening audience and see you next week.